Chapter 6, Estates and Interests. In this chapter, you're going to be able to identify the characteristics of estates and land. You're going to learn what an estate and land is. We're going to describe the characteristics of encumbrances and learn what an encumbrance is, such as liens, easements, and encroachments. So, what is an estate in land? It describes the amount and kind of interest that a person has in real property. There are two categories of estates in land. Freehold, you're free to hold the property forever or a lifetime. That is the category of ownership of real estate. And under this category of freehold estates, there are three types, which we're going to go over in this chapter. And, and then there's the category of less than freehold, which consists of leasehold estates. And there are four types of leasehold estates that we'll go over in chapter 12. But we will run down what they're called and the basics of them in this chapter. So, page 103, take down these highlights right here and then turn over to the next page, 104, and do these highlights and then write ownership category, three types, leasehold estates, four types, page 12, or chapter 12, page 228. And let me know when you have it. Now, this chapter, if you notice on this first page, they say the amount and kind of ownership interest that a person has in real property is an estate and land. Cross out the word ownership because technically that's not the overall description of an estate and land. It's just that this particular chapter is going over the ownership category of estates. So that's why they have the word ownership in the sentence here. So cross out that word ownership just so that you have the definition of what is an estate and land. It describes the amount and kind of interest that a person has in real property. That is an estate in land.
Got it.
Victor, can you explain why we're crossing out ownership again?
Because this particular chapter is focusing on the category of the ownership estates,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not going over the leasehold estates. But the definition of what is an estate and land, we know there's leasehold estates as well, which are not ownership, and there
Mm-hmm.
are estates which describe the category of ownership. There's two categories of estates and land: ownership, which are freehold estates, and less than freehold, which is leasehold estates. So, because this chapter is going only over the ownership category, they have the word ownership there.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you look back at the previous slide, state and land describes the amount and kind of interest that a person has in real property. I did not say ownership interest. There are two categories of estates and land. Ownership, which is freehold estates. You're free to hold the property forever or your lifetime. There are three types of freehold ownership estates that we're going to go over in this chapter. And if it's not freehold, it's less than freehold, which would be a leasehold. And there are four types of those that are gone over in chapter 12.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. So let me know once everybody got these highlights and I could turn a slide on this.
Got it.
All right. Anybody need more time or can I change the slide? Okay.
Please do.
So there are three types of freehold estates: fee simple, fee determinable, and life estate. So on the top of page 104, we highlighted that freehold estates and less than freehold, but just underneath that, we're going to write the number. We're going to highlight here first, and then we'll write the number 3 so it doesn't smear. Okay, so highlight it first and then write the number 3 there. There are 3 freehold estates, and then just highlight the straight down: fee simple, fee determinable, life estate. Now, the first 2 of these estates continue for an indefinite period, and they're inheritable by the owner, or inheritable by the heirs of the owner. The third estate ends upon the death of the person whose life it is based. The life estate. Okay, so leasehold estates involve tenants, and a lease signifies the tenant's right to occupy an owner's property for a limited period of time as defined in a lease. Leases involve tenants, who are the lessee. The landlord is the lessor. A lease is personal property. It's an intangible asset, not considered real property ownership because you don't own it. A lease describes a tenant's right to occupy someone else's property for a limited period of time as defined in a lease, as well as the terms, the length of time, what's being leased, and any limitations on the estate. The lease actually creates the rights that are given to the tenant. This is why if the tenant violates the terms of the lease, they lose those rights to remain there. And their rights can be taken from them. See, normally, nobody can take away your rights once it's been established that you have rights, unless those rights have been given to you on a conditionary basis, and then you violated those conditions. And that's exactly what a lease does. It creates the tenant's rights to occupy someone else's property for a limited period of time as defined in a lease, as well as the terms, the length of time, what exactly is being leased, and any limitations on the estate. So let's highlight here: leasehold estates involve tenants and are estates for a period of time. Leaseholds are considered to be personal property, not real property. And then right under that, it's an intangible or incorporeal assets. And there are 4 types of leasehold estates that we're going to go over in chapter 12. And they are, I just wrote them here just so I could run them down really quick. They're not in your book right here yet. There is the estate for years, which ironically need not be for years. Its distinguishing characteristic is that it has a start date and an end date in it. You know when the lease term begins and ends. A periodic estate is one that's known also as an estate from period to period. This is a type of leasehold that will automatically renew for the same amount of time that the lease was originally written for, like month to month, or 3 months, or every 6 months, or every year to year, or every 2 years. A tenancy at will, an estate or tenancy at will, is just like what it says. You're allowed to stay there at the landlord's will. We'll go over the details of those later. I'm not going into it right now. And then a tenancy at sufferance, a tenancy or estate at sufferance. This is a tenant who had a valid lease. That lease expired. They didn't move out, and they're not paying rent. So every day that they remain there, they're causing the landlord to suffer. Thus, the term tenancy at sufferance. So let's go over these 3 types of freehold estates by writing down the note. I'll just highlight all the highlights and underlines and write these notes next to the titles. And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of them in the next slides. So just use this slide to highlight the notes, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Fee simple estate, that's ownership forever without restrictions. It goes by three names: fee, fee simple, and fee simple absolute.
This is page 104.
This is on page page is this on? 104, correct.
Sorry to interrupt, Victor, but I
Are
had
we
to.
going back?
I'm sorry?
We're going back.
No,
We were on 375, right? 76.
no, we were on 104 here. Oh, yeah, yeah. No, this is a new chapter. We're in chapter 6 now.
Oh, okay.
You disappeared for a little while,
No,
didn't you?
I was here, but I was kind of confused.
All right.
Victor, I had to leave for 20 minutes because I had to pick up my kid. So I don't know if I leave the chat or I just.
Okay, and then we have fee determinable estate. This is ownership forever based on a restriction, and those restrictions are called restrictive covenants. Covenants are legal promises. And then we have life estate. It is ownership based on a life. Well, let me know when you guys got all that written down, the notes written, and all
Wait a
the
second, please.
Huh?
I need.
All right, so fee simple also goes by the name fee simple or fee simple absolute. It's describing the same estate in land. It is the highest form of ownership recognized by law. It's the most complete form of ownership. It's ownership forever without restrictions. Then we have fee determinable, also known as a defeasible fee or conditional fee estate. It's ownership forever as well, but that ownership is based on a restriction. Those restrictions are called restrictive covenants, which can only be added to deeds by private parties, not by government. If the restriction is violated, ownership would revert back to the person who placed the restriction in the deed, and that would be called the possibility of reverter. It's possible for the ownership to revert back to the person who put the restriction in the deed if you were to violate the restriction. Or it would go to a remainder man. What's a remainder man? It's a third party named in an instrument. Instrument's a fancy way of saying document, to be the beneficiary. So the restrictive condition runs with the land once it's created. It passes on to the next owner and can only be removed by the person who added the restriction to the deed, their heirs, or by a court. But courts are not usually likely to remove a restriction that somebody went out of their way to put in a deed, not unless that restriction violates the law in some way. So good luck on that happening. Restrictions could be placed in deeds by developers. Maybe they're developing a condo complex and they put all kinds of restrictions and rules in the deeds that the owners need to follow. Maybe a property owner puts a restriction in the deed that says they don't want you subdividing the land any further, so we keep the neighborhood a suburban neighborhood. We don't want to start now chopping up the properties into smaller houses and putting them right next to each other, dividing them up that way. Maybe they're putting restrictions in the deed for commercial real estate, that they're saying that they don't want this property to ever be a gas station again, unless it's like when Shell sells one of their gas stations. they don't want an Exxon moving in there later, so they'll put a restriction in the deed that the property can never be, they're selling the property because maybe they don't need it anymore, but they're putting a restriction in the deed that it could never be used as a gas station again, unless it's a Shell gas station, as one example, so that would be why they put restrictions in deeds like this. Now, I'm sure you may be able to find some deeds that are really old where properties were in families for long periods of time that have illegal, maybe even discriminatory restrictions in deeds that, for instance, may say that you can't sell the property to a black person. All right. Now, of course, that's illegal. That's racial discrimination. So that does not make the entire document invalid, though. If there are other restrictions in that deed that are not considered illegal or discriminatory, they would remain valid. Only the discriminatory illegal restrictions would be removed. And you're probably not likely to see them anymore because we got politicians that are out there trying to rewrite history, and they want to remove anything offensive that could possibly offend anybody. So I think it was last year or the year before, our governor ordered the states to scan all ownership documents throughout history in every county in New Jersey and remove any offensive phrases or illegal phrases that could be found written into anybody's deeds. Now, I don't know exactly how they're going to do that because there's so much paperwork. Maybe they're just going to remove it from the electronic record, or unless they go into the actual deeds and start scribbling on them and crossing out terms. But that seems like it could take a lot of time and waste a lot of money kind of needlessly to go over and do that. So I'm not exactly sure how he implemented that rule, but it seems a little bit wasteful just to try to rewrite history and erase the past where there are some offensive things that may have happened or occurred in history or have been written into deeds. Obviously, they would not be rewritten into any new deeds if a property is transferred and the ownership is put into someone else's hands now. But that's one thing that the governor did, I think, last year or the year before. I'm not sure if anybody recalls him talking about that, but that's one thing that came up. I'm not sure if that's the best use of our government's money, though. If the restriction is violated, ownership would revert back to the person who placed that restriction in the deed. Once again, this would be called the possibility of reverter because the ownership can revert back to a previous owner who may have had a legal, valid restriction in the deed, not those illegal ones, or to a remainder man. Remainder man, once again, is a third party named in that document to be a beneficiary. So restrictions placed in deeds, they run with the land. They pass from one owner to the next. That's what run with the land means. So it passes with the ownership. And those restrictions can only be removed by the person who added it to the deed, or their heirs, or by a court. But a court is not likely to remove that restriction placed in a deed, unless, of course, it's an illegal one. Then we have life estate. This is ownership based on the life of the person the estate is measured against. They can't leave by will, and they have all the rights or ownership. So basically, what is a life estate? A life estate is if I give you property, I'm giving you the ownership as long as you're alive. It's based on your life. Upon your death, it comes back to me or my heirs or whoever I choose to leave it to in a will. So they can't leave it. A life estate is full ownership, but it's based on the life of the person who the estate is measured against. They cannot leave it by will, and they have all the rights of ownership to sell, lease, mortgage, give away the property, but they can't destroy the value of the estate. They got to keep up paying the taxes on it, etc. Upon their death, ownership reverts back to the person who gave them that life estate, or a remainder man, or their heirs, or devisees. They cannot give it to their own heirs or devisees because your ownership is only based on your life. And when you die, you lose it. An example of this, of where this kind of thing can be used, is remember Hugh Hefner? He was the owner of Playboy. He created Playboy magazine. Anybody remember that? So
Yes.
Hugh Hefner, the owner of Playboy magazine, he had the Playboy Mansion, in Beverly Hills over there. He's dead now. He passed away a couple of years ago. But while he was alive, he put the Playboy Mansion up for sale and he sold it. However, he never moved out of it because he put an agreement in place that whoever he sells it to had to give him back a life estate. So what does that mean? Whoever I sell it to has to give me back the ownership for as long as I'm alive so that I can live out the rest of my years in my beloved mansion. That's basically what his deal was predicated on. And that's what he did. And so he sold his mansion to somebody, which was his next door neighbor. They bought the mansion. Some 40-year-old guy had that kind of scratch to buy the Playboy Mansion and own his own mansion next door already. And then he gave the ownership life estate back to Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner was, I believe, 91 at the time. So, I mean, already well past the life expectancy of the average male in the United States. So it wasn't a bad investment because the guy was like, I mean, how many years longer would he live that you'd have to wait and sit around? So he's bought the Playboy Mansion, gave Hugh back a life estate, and then Hugh died the next year. So it was only 1 year he had to wait around to get the property that he actually purchased. Here's an example of that. All right, so look at that. Here's the Playboy Mansion. Look at the sign that's up here. For sale with owner. So when was this? This was 2016. Playboy Mansion was listed up for sale. It was as reported by TMZ. They said that it looks like Hef is ready to throw in the towel. Within a month, the crumbling 6-acre estate will be up for sale. In spite of the 29-room, 6-bedroom Beverly Hills mansion decrepit condition, its owner, Playboy Enterprises, hopes to sell it north of $200 million. Plus, the buyer will have to grapple with another huge catch. According to TMZ, the buyer will have to grant the 89-year-old, he was 89 at the time, sorry, the 89-year-old Hef a life estate, which means that he can continue living there until death departs him from his beloved bachelor pad. I mean, who the heck wants to buy a home with someone living in it? It says, strange as it may seem, a life estate arrangement is as old as the hills themselves. So a life estate goes way back into the roots of common law, and they're great for providing someone to live in their own home until they die. Effectively, a life estate grants the original owner many of the characteristics of full ownership for the rest of their life. Upon death, complete ownership of the property can pass to another. Common example would be where a husband bequeaths a life estate in the home to his wife with the remainder to his children upon her death. So basically his children become the remainder man. Now, I guess he could do that in some states that have different laws. In New Jersey, your spouse has all the rights to inherit the primary marital residence. But if it is a different property that you have multiple homes, you can leave them to your spouse with the condition that when she dies, you could give her a life estate, that when she dies, then it goes to the children upon their death. That's one way of making sure that the kids get it. All right, now this seems to be a version of a reverse mortgage because it frees up equity in the home during the owner's lifetime without interfering too much with the use and enjoyment of the property. But the privilege is likely to drag down the asking price a lot. While the listing price may be $200 million, most experts say that 80 million to 90 million is more realistic. And I believe he did end up selling it for about 90 to 100 million. So the life estate would now. Why would Hugh Hefner need to sell the Playboy Mansion if he just wanted to live in it for the rest of their life? Well, they're telling you the reason that most people do it is to free up equity, to have money. Was Hugh Hefner broke?
He might not have been broke, but he could have been running out of cash flow.
Oh, he most certainly was. You know how expensive it can be to maintain a mansion full of Playboy bunnies with a 24-hour chef on staff, even though his diet was very specific and limited. He had things his certain way, like he had OCD. He had to have things done a certain way. The bread crust cut off of his sandwiches, and like he was that was Hugh's life. He was very specific. But those 24-hour chefs were more there for his guests, and then maintaining a mansion and the parties all the time, nonstop, having an ex-wife that you give her your yacht. She's not going to be living on a yacht alone. You're going to need a whole crew with a captain and people to run that yacht. And a yacht is a version of a boat. It's a big boat. And what does boat stand for? If any boat owners out there, it stands for bust out another 1,000, because anytime something mess goes wrong on it, it's thousands of dollars to fix it. It's always expensive to maintain boats. So it's a lot of money to maintain the lifestyle that Hugh was living. Yeah, he was running low on money, especially now that magazines, how many people out there are running out and still buying magazines? Pretty quiet in here, So how many people are running out buying magazines versus just looking up stuff online, So magazines are something that we're kind of passing over. But he still had the Playboy channel on TV to have all of his porn on, on TV now, a pay-per-view channel, and then he still had the magazine being published and websites. But one interesting little factoid is that Hugh Hefner made his biggest income stream was the licensing of his products, mainly the logo of the Playboy Bunny, which can be found in anything from car air fresheners to you name it, T-shirts or shirts to all kinds of stuff. But he was running low on money. Now or he saw it starting to decline. And Hugh Hefner had sons and daughters, and he put his daughter in charge years ago. He stopped running Playboy magazine himself. He was just the figurehead of it. He put his daughter in charge of running Playboy magazine, and she did a bang-up job on it for years. And then she didn't want to do that anymore. She wanted to go in a different direction. So Hugh put his one of his sons in charge of running Playboy magazine now, and his son, a uber ultra liberal, wanted to try things out with his I guess protesting type of a way that they have. And what he did is he decided he was going to have some fun with his first edition of Playboy magazine. And so what his grand idea was a major turnoff to the reader base, the readership. His grand idea was he was going to have a first transgender centerfold in Playboy magazine. not what all the guys that subscribed to that were actually expecting to see. So needless to say, half the people they canceled their subscriptions to Playboy magazine, saw a huge drop in the income from that. Because they didn't want to have anything to deal with it anymore. So it wasn't they weren't smart decisions that he was making now. And so therefore he decided that he was going to sell the Playboy mansion, take that money so he could live off of for the rest of his life, and then which ended up only being one more year. And then that was the end of the Playboy Mansion and Playboy Estate. A place where presidents and dignitaries and famous actors and actresses visited, singers, you name it, were at. You had to go to a party at Hef's place in the Playboy Mansion, right? So everything from bands like the Beatles that were there to, he had a lot of famous acts, but that's all gone by now.
Fun fact, one of my friends was actually on the cover. She was from America's Next Top Model, and she got featured on, I think she might have been like the last black model that made the cover or something like that. But little fun fact.
Oh, yeah, that's neat. That's cool.
Yeah.
Single?
She is. Apparently it's harder to date in LA.
Yeah, throw that out there, yeah. All right. So so let's say Hugh Hefner, he did this thing at 89 years old, okay, and they say, okay, he down here in the article, I knew it was here somewhere. The average US male's life expectancy is 84 and a half years old. There you go. All right. So, well, I do have some links to somewhere. There's there's pictures and images of what the guy did. Hugh Hefner did put some other stipulations that he can't tear down the Playboy Mansion and then just turn it into a rental property or another gaudy mansion to sell because of all the history there. He couldn't just append it, make it an appendage onto his estate and to his that's neighboring.
That's mine.
So it was interesting. He added a lot more rules to what could be done with that Playboy mansion and that Playboy estate. So let me see. I actually have something about that. Let's see. Where is that? The Playboy Mansion. Here we go. Playboy Mansion. Wow.
Do you think that was a good investment? I would think it was a great investment in terms of like, it's almost like buying the Elvis house or, turn it into a museum or something.
Yeah, but, what is he doing with it though? I don't know.
I don't really. Okay.
I just know that he can't tear it down, and it needed a lot of work. I mean, this is an actual picture of the Playboy Mansion from the exterior. Doesn't look bad from a distance, but it was really crumbling estate. Inside he hasn't updated it. He last updated it in the 70s, and so you got all this old carpet. He had his 3 little lap dogs that the bunny said weren't really trained, so they would pee and crap wherever they wanted. So imagine the smell from the old carpet full of dog pee and crap all over the place, all the parties and spilled drinks, and it's dark inside. I mean, it's not really an updated place. It's kind of decrepit on the inside, and it's kind of falling apart on the outside. It needed a lot of maintenance, and he just didn't put the money back into it. So what is he actually doing? What was he actually doing with it? His plans, I don't know. I don't know. You'd have to do a little research on that to find more about it. But I got a whole list of links here about the Playboy Mansion, what happened to it, what's he doing with it. Let me see. New aerial images of the Playboy Mansion, progress of remodeling 2 years later. Oh, let's take a look at this from the Daily Mail. Yeah, he sold it for $100 million. The interesting thing is the guy. His name is Metropoulos. How does this 40-year-old guy get enough money to own a bigger mansion next door and then buys the Playboy Mansion? The guy owns brands. Now, his father is a Uber billionaire, and he is as well. He got this from owning brands. I think he owns the Pabst Blue Ribbon beer brand, along with a bunch of food brands like Nabisco and all those things. Apparently, there's a lot of money in buying and owning all the foods and drinks that the world consumes. So here's some pictures of it. So look at this. Here is the Playboy Mansion the way that it was. Can you guys see this? Am I sharing it with you on screen still or no?
Yes.
Yes.
And then here's what it looks like now. So they kind of like stripped it away, right? You see that? They're doing some work on the roof to fix this slate roof. They ripped up the parking lot. That fountain is gone. In the back, in the back where the lawn is, they're doing some work. We scroll down a little bit more. Okay, so here's that front view. And today it's like this. They're redoing the facade. These are just supplies and stuff, the trailers, for all the renovations that they're redoing. Where's that grotto? That famous grotto. They're redoing that, and the guest house. Oh, here he goes. So back here was that famous grotto where they had the parties. The grotto is that cave-like environment where the pool ran through. The Playboy Mansion itself. You had a pool over here. The front lawn was over here. Tennis courts. Yeah. Wow. So what was it? It was only 5 acres, but it's in Beverly Hills, California. So I mean, that's some of the richest land in California, Beverly Hills. Imagine the tax bill there. Here's the guest house. That grotto. Ugh, that must be kind of skeevy. All the parties and stories things that happened in that grotto. Anyway, enough time on Hugh Hefner and his Playboy Mansion. But that's an example of where it can be used. Now, there's a little bit of a twist, Playboy, to the Playboy. There's a little bit of a twist to a life estate. There's something called the life estate por otra vie. It's Latin. I know some people we get in here that are French, and they're like, no, that's French. And I'm like, no, it's Latin. And I can prove it to you. No, por otra vie, that is Latin. And you're pronouncing it wrong. Okay, yeah, okay, snob. If it was French, it would be P-O-R, not P-U-R. It is Latin, P-U-R. We're learning these real estate terms are rooted in Latin, not French. So, por otra vie, it's pronounced the same. It means the same thing, but it's spelled differently. See, P-U-R, por otra vie, for the life of another. It's based on a third party's life. So a life estate that's not based on the life of the person that it's given to, but based on someone else's life. That's what a life estate por otra vie is, okay? So it is not based on the life of the person it's given to. It is based on a third party's life. This slide you should probably snap a picture of because it gives you the definitions and the explanations of everything here quite well, all on one slide, versus kind of a broken up definitions and run around explanations of stuff that is kind of disjointed in the book for the highlights that we did so far and that we're going to continue to do. So, anybody need more time to snap a picture or anything? Okay.
No, I'm good.
We're good.
So once again, fee simple, just another rundown of the same thing. Highest form of ownership interest, most complete form of ownership recognized by law. It's unrestricted ownership forever. Goes by the terms fee simple, and fee simple absolute. It's ownership forever without restrictions. You even own it after you die. You could get to say who gets it. Fee determinable, you get to do the same thing even after you die. You get to say who gets it. However, a fee determinable estate, also known as a conditional fee because it's based on a condition, or defeasible fee, It's based on a restriction. Those restrictions are placed in deeds, and those restrictions are called restrictive covenants. It is ownership that is also forever, provided that you don't violate the restriction that it's based on. And if the restriction is violated, ownership would revert back to the person who placed that restriction in the deed. And if they're no longer with us, then it would be their heirs or devisees or a remainder man that could be the only one that inherit those rights and then be able to undo them. So this is called the possibility of reverter if you violate the restrictions and you could lose that property. A remainder man is a third party named in an instrument, a document, to be a beneficiary, and the restrictive covenant would run with the land. It passes from one owner to the next. The only way to remove it is to get that person who put that restriction in the deed or one of their heirs, devisees, or a remainder man to remove it. Courts are unlikely to remove the restriction unless it's illegal. The possibility of reverter just indicates that there is a possibility, if you violate the restrictions, for the ownership to revert back to the previous owner. And they don't got to pay you anything for it either, because you are aware of the terms and the conditions of your ownership, and you shouldn't have violated them. Now, here in the book, they give a different example. They say, for example, an owner conveys a fancy word for transfer. Owner conveys 1,000 acres of to the Open Space Foundation, so long as it's maintained as a wildlife preserve. Now, 5 years later, the foundation decides that they're going to build their corporate headquarters on the land. So title to that land would revert back to the owner because they ignored that restriction that keeps it a wildlife preserve. Instead, they tore it all up and they put their corporate headquarters there. So if the person who sold them that land finds out about it, they could take them to court and require them to turn the ownership back over to them, because they violated the condition, the one condition they placed in there for you to own it. They went ahead and they violated it. So because they violated that term, it would go back to the previous owner, a remainder man, devisee, or any other beneficiary. So you can see there could be a lot of reasons why you would want to put that, sell a property and put conditions in the deed that the future owner would have to respect. And if they don't, then you could they could risk losing it. And then lastly, once again, we have the life estate. It's limited to a specific person that it's given to. Ownership would revert back to the person who granted the life estate, or to their heirs, or devisees, or a remainder man. A life estate can be tied to the life of a third party. It's called the life estate por trevi. The holder of a life estate has true ownership of real property with all the rights and benefits, but only for their life. Life interest may be sold, leased, mortgaged, or given away, but it will always end on the death of the person against whose life it is measured. They cannot be left in a will to the devisees or heirs. Why? Because it was based on your life and of your life only. And when you die, you lose the ownership rights and interest. That's why. All right, so Hugh Hefner, we did that Playboy Mansion thing already, the life estate. We already did all these highlights. We got all that down. So let's highlight here on page 105, though. You didn't get this yet. A life estate por trevi is for another's life. That's on page 105 in the first paragraph there. The holder of a life estate has true ownership of real property. but it always ends on the death of the person against whose life it is measured against. Let me know when you have those highlights.
Got it.
Done.
So this is the way that a remainder man works. The grantor is the owner. They give the ownership to a life tenant. That tenant dies, the title reverts back to the grantor. And if they're dead, it would go to their heirs or devisees or a remainder man if one was named. Or it could work like this. The grantor gives the title to a life tenant, and then it goes to a remainder man, heirs, or devisees. Okay? That the grantor would name. Because they could say, well, even if I'm still alive, I don't want the property back. I'm going to say that when that life tenant dies, it goes to a remainder man that I'm going to name, or heirs or devisees. All right, dower and courtesy. We learned about this. We'll learn about it again. Dower and courtesy are ancient rights that a spouse has in their spouse's property. Dower is the wife's interest in the husband's estate upon his death. Courtesy is the husband's interest in the wife's estate upon her death. You have to remember and know which one is the husband's right and which one is the wife's right. New Jersey abolished the creation of any new dower or courtesy rights on May 28, 1980, and instead now gives both husband and wife joint possession of the property that is their main marital residence. Your spouse does not have any interest in any other properties that you own unless you specifically grant them those rights. Prior to May 28, 1980, your spouse has interest in all the property that you own. So property acquired before this date gives the surviving spouse a life estate in all real estate owned by the deceased person, no matter what other provisions were made for in the will. In New Jersey, children can be disinherited, but a surviving spouse is entitled to 1/3 of the estate for all the property acquired after May 28, 1980. The determination of the augmented estate is a complex calculation. If the required minimum is not left to the surviving spouse, courts may grant 1/3 of the estate to them by the right of election. Dower and courtesy is where we're going to highlight everything on page 105 and 106. Remember the reasons why it's important to know if you have dower or courtesy rights is so that you know who needs to sign all contracts and listing agreements. Only the spouse who's listed as the owner needs to sign the listing agreements and contracts if they were married after May 28, 1980. If they were married before this date, both spouses need to sign. Because your other spouse, even if they're not listed on the documents as the owner, they still have a dower or courtesy rights interest in that property, all the property that you own. Of course, there could be ways around that. If before you got married, you had your spouse sign a prenuptial agreement, but people always find ways around prenups if they're poorly drawn up by a budget-friendly attorney who does not specialize in these things. There There are people that specialize in drawing up prenuptial agreements and contracts like this, guys. And it's easy to poke holes in prenuptial agreements because often people violate the terms of them and they don't even know it. You know how a good attorney can poke holes through a prenuptial agreement? You follow the money. If $1 of the joint marital assets are used on that property that only the one spouse owns, now both spouses are contributing to that property and have an interest. But I'm not going to get into the legal aspects of that. For that, contact an attorney. All right, everybody got that?
Yes.
All right. Before we even dive into this, so that I can teach you, and it's an easy way for you guys to remember, I'm going to ask you a question. Have you guys ever heard the term encumbrance before? Forget about real estate for a moment. If something is encumbered, what is an encumbrance? Don't look at the book. I don't want you to do that. I'm trying to, because if you do, then it's not going to help you remember this. I'm trying to show you guys an easy way to remember this. To remember this, you need to be able to tell me, have you ever heard of the word encumbrance before or know what it is?
Yes, it's burden
It's a burden of some
or restriction. Yeah.
Okay. If you're encumbered by something, you could be encumbered by my weight. I could jump on your back, right? If I jump on your back and hold on, you're encumbered by my weight. You're burdened, you're held down by my weight, right?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. Now, can you guys still move around if I were to jump on your back and you're being burdened by all that additional weight of me jumping on your back and holding on for dear life? Can you still move around?
No.
You can't? What are you going to crumble and fall to the ground? Only that much. Okay, so let's just say that I jump on you and you're now encumbered by my weight. Okay. Or maybe somebody half my size jumps on your back and holds on and holds on. Can you still move around even though you're encumbered by their weight?
Yes.
Yes. It's just harder to, right?
Yeah.
That's the visual I want you to have in your head. And that's the thought I want you to have in your head to understand so that you'll better understand when we talk about real estate encumbrances. I want to first make it personal to you. What is an encumbrance? It's some kind of burden, something that's weighing you down, making it harder to move. But if I jump on your back, you could still move around. It's just going to be much harder to do because you're burdened by all of my weight hanging onto you. It may be very difficult to move, but you could still move it. You could still move around. In that same way, real estate, if it's encumbered by something, we didn't even go over what real estate encumbrances are. If real estate is encumbered by something, can you still move it, sell it? Yes, it's just going to be a lot harder to. Kind of like you being encumbered by my weight, it's going to be harder for you to move around, but you could still move around. So if real estate's encumbered by something, can you still move it, sell it? Yes, it's just going to be a lot harder to. And now that you have that understanding, and you could go into that with any question that's possibly asked to you about encumbrances, let's get into it. An encumbrance is a burden on a property. Claims, liens, charges, or liabilities attached to and binding on real property, limiting its value or title or use. Liens are financial claims on property. You have mortgage liens, tax liens, lawsuit judgments, mechanics liens. or physical and usage encumbrances, like deed restrictions that could restrict how you could use a property. Can't use it as a gas station. Or easements. These are rights of way that you give to somebody a right to use your property for a specific purpose or come on your property for a specific purpose. Licenses. It's permission for somebody to enter your land for a specific purpose. And encroachments. Any illegal extension of something from a neighboring property that goes over the property line. They built the shed over the property line, or the garage or the fence is actually on your property. It's over the property line. That's a physical encumbrance. Usage encumbrances could be like somebody has a easement right to come onto your property for some reason. It can limit the value for a potential buyer or desirability of a potential buyer to want to buy it still. So here's a little brain teaser. All liens are encumbrances, but not all encumbrances are liens. Well, that's true, because what are liens? Financial claims on property. And what is an encumbrance? It's a burden on the property. So all financial claims on property are burdens on property, but not all burdens on properties are financial claims on property. You see how I did that by translating the words as I'm reading the sentence? That's how you guys should work it when you're taking an exam. This is why vocabulary is such a big part of your exams. Because if you understand the words, you could translate them while you're reading the question and better understand what the hell the question's asking of you. Because we'll look at this, if you're just reading using this terminology, these are new terms that you're just learning. All liens are encumbrances, but not all encumbrances are liens. My mind is spinning a little bit trying to get a grasp on what the heck did he just say, right? But if I describe it like all financial claims are burdens on the property, but not all burdens on property are financial in nature, right? Now I understood that perfectly, right? So let's highlight that in the book on page 106 under encumbrances. And let me know when you all got it.
Done.
And anybody else still highlighting?
Got it.
Okay. So also on page 106, a little bit further down, now we're going to highlight these things under liens, which we just went over. Liens are financial claims against the property that provide security or debt or obligation of the property owner. And if the obligation is not repaid, the lien holder or creditor has the right to have it paid. It's going to be paid out of the property from the proceeds of a court sale. That court sale would be a foreclosure sale, right? So real estate taxes have first claims against all proceeds of such sale because there's two things certain in life: death and taxes. We are all going to die at some point, and we all got to pay our taxes. Liens are classified either voluntarily or involuntarily, or general or specific. Oh, general and specific. What does that mean? You guys should already know this. I explained this one time before you, or several times before for you. What is general? What does specific mean? Specific is a narrow scope. General, when talking in general, it's a wider scope. It covers more things, right? So a general lien covers all property that you own, including your personal property, A specific lien covers only one parcel of real estate only. So a voluntary lien is one that's created by the property owner.
Yes.
Like your mortgage loan. You went out of your way to get that, right? You submitted an application, your pay stubs, your tax returns, you paid for appraisals, you paid for property inspections, all kinds of stuff in order to as requirements to get that loan. You went out of your way to get it. So a mortgage loan is an example of a voluntary lien. Property taxes are an example of an involuntary lien. Who the hell wants to pay those? I mean, we all got to pay them, but who wants to pay them? Really, it's imposed on us. So property taxes are an example of an involuntary lien. We still have to pay them, but we didn't go out of our way to try to get them. So general liens affect all property, not just real estate. That includes your personal assets like your car, your bank accounts, etc. Specific liens are placed against one parcel of real estate only. So if one house can get foreclosed on, it does not affect any other property that you own. Taxes, if you get foreclosed on due to non-payment of taxes, here's an interesting little factoid for you. It doesn't affect your credit. However, if you get foreclosed on due to non-payment of your mortgage loan, that destroys your credit. Because the taxing body, your city, does not report to credit reporting agencies that you're not paying your taxes. They just take the property, they sell it at auction, they get their tax dollars, and then they could care less about you after that. So once again, here's in the book, just showing you, general liens affect all your property. Specific liens only affect one parcel of real estate only. And voluntary liens are created by the owner, and involuntary liens are created without the owner's consent. So here are the effects of liens on the title. The owner is still free to sell to someone who's willing to take the encumbrance along with the property. So can you sell a property that has liens on it? Or any kind of encumbrance for that matter? Can you sell encumbered property? Yeah, if somebody's willing to purchase it with those encumbrances. So encumbrances, liens, and other kinds, they run with the land. They go with the real estate, and they're still binding after a sale. However, liens, except property taxes and special assessments, which is another type of property tax, do not survive foreclosure. They must be paid off first. Liens, at least property taxes and special assessments do. All the others do not survive foreclosure. Let me clarify what that means. They kind of do. If your property gets foreclosed on because you didn't make your mortgage payments, but you had a second lien, a second mortgage, and you had a mechanic's lien because you didn't pay a contractor who did work on your property. Those liens need to get paid back as well, provided that there's enough money from the sale to cover them. So when you get foreclosed on, they sell the property at auction. If there's enough money to pay off that first mortgage position, the first lien holder's position, they get paid back first. Then you go back to see the next lien holder. If there's enough money to pay them back, they get paid back first. And then if there's any money left over, any other lien holders can get paid back. And if there's still more money left after all the lien holders get paid, that balance, they don't get to keep that. It goes back to the property owner who got foreclosed on. That's the way foreclosure works. Liens attached to the property, but not to the property owner. So you're the one that owes the money, but they can't chase after you for it. They chase after the property for it because they could sell it at auction and get the money from the property. So liens attached to the property, not to the property owner. Now, if they sell the property, they get the property and they sell the property and there's not enough from the proceeds to pay them back completely, then they could take you to court and try to chase after the property owner to get something out of it. But now it's unsecured. They're just trying to chase after and hope that you have some money that you're willing to pay them. Otherwise, you could just file bankruptcy and say, nope, I'm not paying you nothing. Although in most cases, the next owner is not personally liable for the debt secured by a lien, they could lose their property because that property can be taken by a creditor through foreclosure to get their money back. So when you're buying a property, is it in your best interest to do a title search to see if there are any outstanding liens on the property that the seller did not make you aware of?
Yes, we should.
Absolutely. It is so important to get a title search done before you buy a property. It's like another type of home inspection. I mean, we know of home inspections that inspect the physical house, right? But there's other types of inspections. You know, you get a surveyor that surveys the land, making sure that there's no encroachments from the neighboring properties where they may have built the garage halfway onto your property or things of that nature. You'd want to know about that, right? So that's another type of home inspection. But what about the records in the public record as far as loans and people who are owed money that are making claims against the property? Maybe somebody got sued and the previous owner got sued and they had a lawsuit judgment and then they turned that judgment into a lien against the property. If you buy that property and that lien is not settled first, that lien would pass on to the next owner. They run with the land. So because there's a new owner now on the property, that lien doesn't disappear. It's still attached to the property. This is why we attach liens to properties. It makes it harder for somebody who owes you money to just get rid of it without making sure that they get paid in their share of what they need to get paid back first. Because most likely, most people were not going to pay you and buy your property knowing that there's liens on there that they'd have to pay out of their own pocket if they wanted to keep the property or they risk losing it. Because who the heck in their right mind would do that? That's why this system works. So they can't come after the next owner to pay off the lien, but they can come after their property, which served as collateral for that lien. And they do that by foreclosure. So let's read what I wrote here on foreclosure. Taxes get paid first in the event of a foreclosure sale. If any money is left over, liens get paid back in the order in which they were recorded in a public record to secure their repayment order. In some cases, if a property owner in danger of foreclosure were to sell their property, which had a lot of equity, they could pay off all of their debts and still walk away with a nice profit and keep their credit in good standing. Look, there are people out there that may have most of their house paid off. They only owe a little bit of money still on the house, but they maybe lost their job and they're having other financial difficulties because maybe they got medical issues and such. So they end up getting foreclosed on, but they didn't owe that much money left on the house. It's unfortunate, but they can lose their house if they don't find a way to pay it back. And then the property gets sold off at auction, gets sold for way less than what they could have got for it if they listed the property with us to try to sell it in the normal way. and then they get their lien holder gets paid back whatever money that was owed to them, and they get back the balance of the equity. But if it was sold at auction, it's not going to be as much than as if it was sold in a traditional sale. You understand? So there is possibility that you could get foreclosed on if you had a lot of equity in a property and still walk away with money. However, sometimes people fall on hard times, try to let their problems sort themselves out, which they never do. Foreclosure happens, and if there are enough proceeds to pay off all the debts, then the homeowner will still get the remaining money back. If they sold it themselves, they would have received more than the actual sale at an auction. This is my explanation. This is nowhere in the book. That's just my additional 2 cents that I gave you. So once again, we know encumbrances, liens and otherwise, they run with the land. Liens attached to the property, not to the property owner. Real estate taxes always get paid back first. It's a priority. 2 things certain in life, death and taxes. You always have to pay your taxes. They jump up in priority even over a first lien holder's position. Taxes always come first. They need to be paid back first, even in the event of foreclosure. You could buy a house at a foreclosure auction. If the taxes weren't paid, you could still get foreclosed on due to non-payment of taxes. So we have voluntary liens and involuntary ones. Here's just some examples of that. And when you do pay off your lien, you paid off the mortgage lien on your house. Do they remove the lien from the public record? The answer is no. Anytime a document is added to a public record, it is there forever. All they do is add another document saying that that lien had been satisfied. It's been paid off. So they add another document to the public records called a satisfaction of mortgage or satisfaction of lien. So now if somebody does a title search, they could see all the records in the public record that were recorded and attached to that house that say, oh, all right, this person, they took out a loan to buy the house. Oh, there was a satisfaction of lien showing that that loan was paid off in full. So they can match it up and see if there's any outstanding liens on the property or not. And you could do this over time. And that's what they do in a title search to determine whether you got good, clear ownership and if it's okay for you to go through with the purchase or not. Or maybe you should want to make sure that the owner clears this up first or that up first. Any liens on property create what's known as a cloud on the title. When you hear the term cloud on the title, think of a dark thunderstorm cloud hovering just over your house. You want to buy a house with a dark thunderstorm cloud hovering over just that house in the whole neighborhood? It's always raining and thunderstorming over your house only?
Of course not.
Of course not. Of course not. Thank you for being the one person that answers me in this class. So of course not. So anytime you hear that term cloud on the title, I want you to picture that thunderstorm cloud hovering over that property. So that's an indication that there's a problem, right? Wouldn't you think it's kind of weird that there's a thunderstorm cloud hovering over one house? That's kind of weird, right? This is just me. That's kind of weird. So that's your indication. There's a problem. Stop before you buy this house. There is a cloud on the title. That indicates that there is a problem with this house. You want to clear up that cloud and let the sun shine in before you go forward with this purchase. You know, here are the different ways. We went over this when we skipped to chapter 20 before, but let's just go over a quick rundown again. You know, here's some actions where you can lose your property due to involuntary alienation. If a person dies intestate and no heirs can be located through the process of escheat, the state takes the property. If land is needed for a public use through eminent domain and just compensation, a public or governmental agency can take the property. For non-payment of a debt secured by the property that was put up for collateral, through the judicial process of foreclosure, the sheriff can take the property and sell it at auction to the highest bidder, and then the lien holders get paid back until there's no more money left. And through the open, notorious, continuous, hostile, and adverse use of another person's property for a period of time as prescribed by law, an adverse possession process, a court proceeding, an easement by prescription, can be perfected with a suit for adverse possession, and then an adverse possessor, that squatter, can claim ownership of the property. So, in the event of foreclosure, who gets paid back first? Liens get paid back according to their priority. And that priority is determined and established based on the date of recording of that lien in the public records, with the exception of two things. Real estate taxes, they always jump to the head of the line to get paid back first, and a mechanic's lien, which is a contractor's lien. If you had a contractor do some work on your property and you did not pay them back, well, they don't need to record their lien in the public record right away. They could retroactively backdate it later. They could decide to record it later on. And if there were other liens that were since recorded in the public record, they could jump ahead of them. Mechanics liens, these contractor liens, they could be retroactively backdated to the date that the materials were delivered or the work began, whichever occurred first. Let's highlight those notes so that we could get on moving to the next page, if you got it. Let me know.
Got it.
All right.
I got it.
So liens get paid back according to their priority. That's all this is showing, different types of liens and their dates that they were recorded. The date of filing and recording the liens in the public record is what establishes the priority of the liens, with the exception of taxes and mechanics liens, of course. A lien and other encumbrances run with the land, meaning they pass on from one owner to the next. They attach to the property and not the property owner. The priority of liens establishes the order in which the debts are repaid. Tax liens, once again, take priority over all other liens. Otherwise, they're paid back according to the date when they're recorded in the public record, with the exception of a mechanics lien, which can be backdated to the date that the work began or the materials were delivered. And mortgage liens, junior liens, which are second loans and home improvement loans. Then you also have judgments. These are decrees from a court saying that someone owes you money, and they could turn that into a lien against the property. So a mortgage lien is a voluntary lien. And highlight these construction liens, also known as a mechanics lien, can be retroactively backdated.
Got it.
All right. Lis pendens is a public notice of possible future legal action against the property. So that legal action being foreclosure. So a judgment or other decree affecting real estate is rendered at the conclusion of a lawsuit, and generally considerable time elapses between the filing of a lawsuit and the rendering of a judgment. When any suit is filed that potentially affects title to a specified parcel of real estate, such as a foreclosure suit, a lis pendens is recorded. And a lis pendens is not a lien on the property, but rather a notice of possible future legal action against the property. So anytime like a mortgage lender, if a borrower falls behind on their mortgage payments, that mortgage company, their lender, they record a lis pendens in the public record and attach it to the property when they fall behind at least a month or two on their mortgage payments, usually about 2 months. So recording of a lis pendens gives notice to all interested parties, such as a prospective purchaser and lenders, and establishes a priority for the later lien, which is dated back to the date the lis pendens was filed for the record. So the lis pendens creates a cloud on the title until that lawsuit is settled. Wouldn't it be great if you guys can get your hands on a list of everybody who's behind on their mortgage payments?
Yes.
Would that be useful to you as real estate agents or investors? Well, if you knew how to search the public records or had the time to, I guess that could you could make your own list, but that's not very feasible. But there are companies down there that basically pay the person who's recording these documents in the public record that anytime they record them to the public record, to also type it into their database. And then they go sell access to that database. And here's a couple of those databases where you could get that access. njlispendens.com, realtytrack.com. Here's a tool that gives you access to those databases. This is a pretty good tool, theredx.com, as well as you could search the public records, the tax records, but this may not give you the latest updates, is narrpr.com, that free tool that we get with our realtor membership. Now, RealtyTrack claims to have the latest up-to-date ones. That's why they cost a little bit more than the others, because they claim to have the latest. As soon as something gets added in there, they got it in their database, and they got people down at all 21 counties looking this over.
Victor, one question.
Yeah.
The resources, the broker will give it to us, or we had to pay for them?
They may not even know about these. This is something I'm teaching you about.
Oh, that's nice. So screenshot.
These are tips I'm giving you. These are extras I'm giving you that most real estate schools will not even mention. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
I'm giving you guys resources to help you get started in this business. And a lot of times you guys aren't even aware I'm giving you these resources. These are actually in the ClassLinks Word document. So you don't got to worry about them. These are listed there. All right. So what is an easement? An easement is a right, and your rights cannot be revoked once it's been established that you have them. So a right acquired by one party to use the land of another for a particular purpose is an easement. So highlight that and underline the word right. Because an easement is a right. An easement could either be a pertinent or engross. So we're going to learn about a bunch of different types of easements, but they fall into two categories, either appurtenant or engross. Easement engross is a utility easement for utility companies. An easement appurtenant, well, we'll get into all the other types of easements in a minute. Let's first go over an easement is a right, cannot be revoked. Everybody got this written down on page 109?
Yes,
Please.
you've got it.
Oh, I guess we're going to get into it right now anyway. So I guess we could highlight this page 109. An easement that grants the right of an owner of an adjacent parcel of land is an easement appurtenant. An adjacent parcel is not the person across the street. It's the neighboring property that's touching yours. So an easement that crosses over yours and neighboring properties is an easement appurtenant. There's always going to be a dominant estate and a servient estate involved. A dominant estate is the one that's benefiting from the easement. The servient estate is the one whose property is being walked over and being used. So the one that's benefiting from the easement is the dominant estate, and the tract of land which is being crossed over and used is the servient estate. So like if you have a shared driveway or somebody needs to cross over your land to get to theirs. The one whose land is being crossed over is the servient estate, and the one who gets to cross over someone else's land is the dominant, because they're benefiting from the easement. And then down here, you got easement engross as a utility easement. In this type of easement, this is the only type of easement where if the need for the easement were to cease, the easement would cease to exist. That only applies to utility easements. Well, let me know when you guys got all the highlights.
Got it.
Done.
Easements are either appurtenant or engross, like I said. And an easement is a right acquired by one party to use the land of another for a specific purpose. And we're about to go over easement appurtenance, and easement by necessity, which is also an easement appurtenant, easement by prescription, which we already went over, easement engross, party wall easements, how to create an easement and terminate one. So we already highlighted the definition of that an easement is a right acquired by one party to use the land of another for a specific purpose. These are usually written into the deed itself or on a survey. And these rights cannot be taken away once it's established that you have them. A license, however, is permission to enter the land of another for a specific purpose. And these are often verbal and they can be revoked at any time. Like if I were to say, hey, neighbor, feel free to come over my house and you could hop in the pool at any time, even if I'm not at home. I just gave you a license to come onto my property for a specific purpose to use the pool. I gave you permission. However, that permission can be revoked. I could say, we could get into a fight and I could say, I don't want you on my damn property anymore. Boom, I just revoked your license. So that's how that works. So you could highlight them here. You should already have this one highlighted. Go to page 112 temporarily ahead to 112 and highlight this one. And write their Licenses can be revoked, and it is permission. You see the differences in the definition? License is permission, easement is a right. Licenses can be revoked, rights cannot. Everybody got that? Got to let me know when you guys get the highlights so that we can
Got
move.
it.
We're done.
Okay, thank you. All right, go back to page 110 here. Easement is a right acquired by one party to use the land of another for a specific purpose. The easements run with the land. They pass from one owner to the next, even with the change of ownership. A party could also have an easement right in the air above the land, or subsurface easement rights to what's beneath it or in it, like the mineral rights. Even if the property is sold, those easements still need to be honored. The holder of an easement only has rights, not an estate or ownership interest in the land itself. And easements fall into two categories. They could either be appurtenant or engross. Engross is the utility easements, and these type of easement would cease if the need for the easement were to cease to exist. That statement only applies to an easement engross. So here's an example of an easement appurtenant here drawn on this picture here. Lot B on the left, Lot A on the right. Lot B owner has an easement appurtenant to cross over onto Lot A owner's property to use the lake. So who is the dominant estate and who is the servient estate there?
B is the dominant.
B is the dominant and A is the servient. That is correct. Because A's property is the one that's being walked over, so they're the servient. They're served like a servant. They're serving up their property on a platter. And lot owner B is walking over their property and benefiting from using it. So you see this utility line over here. Let's say they're power lines or telephone poles, whatever. It's crossing over both of these properties here. It is a easement engross because it's used for utility lines, power lines, cable, FiOS, we've got gas pipes and sewer lines and gas lines and water mains. All of these things would have a utility easement to put the pipes onto your property to give you the access to those utilities. And that easement is called an easement engross. An easement by necessity is any easement that makes it necessary to get onto your property. It's necessary to cross over someone else's. That is an easement by necessity. So if only So if the only access to a parcel is through another's property, the owner can acquire an easement by necessity to reach their land. It's for the purpose of ingress and egress. In Latin, that means entrance and exit. Ingress begins with in, so entrance to get into the property, and egress to exit it. Everybody got those highlights?
Yes.
Yes.
Wow, it's over time already. You guys notice that?
Yes.
I should have said something. Okay.